I'm really excited for today's guest. We have Representative Mike Moyle. He has been a representative from District 10A since 1998. He's the longest serving state representative in Idaho. He was the majority leader from 2006 to 2022, and now Mike is the 42nd Speaker of the House. He has been a friend and a colleague for a long time. He's a local kid that grew up here and is passionate about his family and about Idaho and about serving Idaho. I'm really excited to catch up with Mike and hear a little bit about this year's legislative session and the future of Idaho. Speaker Mike Moyle. Speaker Mike Moyle, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, first of all, getting you off a tractor long enough to come in here.
I even showered because I was spraying corn, so you should be happy.
I do. A lot of people don't know. I know you personally, and you are one of the greatest Idahoans, and you just are. But I'm telling you, almost every time I call you, it's probably 80% of the time you're like, let me draw off the tractor. So, I mean, you still do this actively.
Still do. Idaho, man, all the way. Love Idaho.
We're going to get into your history a little bit, but thank you for coming on. I do mean it.
Well, thanks for having me.
You got a lot going on, and we've had you on our list for a while, but I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
You are all Idaho, right?
I mean, that.
Born in Rexburg.
Born in Rexburg.
Grew up here, and your family. Tell us just a little bit about growing up in Idaho, what it was like for you, and a little bit about your parents.
Well, I was laughing. I was born in Rexburg, Idaho. My mother taught school at Ricks College. She was taught nursing, and my father was a field man for UNI Sugar.
A little bit closer.
A little bit closer. And Dad was a field man for UNI Sugar. And Dad said he woke up one day and he had the kids in a subdivision. He said, I don't want my kids raised here. So he packed up, and my grandfather had a little farm over in Meridian, and he went there, and that's where we ended up. And then we had a farm there in Star. And I can still remember when I was 6 years old, maybe, I would ride my horse from down Ustick, down North Marine Road to Ustick, down Ustick to Linder. My dad would hide a fishing pole so I could fish on the Boise River when I went by there. And then I'd ride home on, I still remember the horse, a little black mare, her name was Twinkle, whatever. But, the world was different then, right? Kids could have that kind of an experience when they were that young. And it was a safe place. It was all ag. It was just beautiful. But people found us, and life has changed. It's grown.
It has changed, but I think it's important, Mike, because there's a lot of people who, when I got to spend some time going around state, there's a lot of people that have a heritage and love of this place. They love the people. They love the land. Yep. They love the nature. They love the rivers. They love the ag part of it. It is who we are.
Absolutely.
And I think for someone like you that's in your DNA, it's a big part of Idaho.
Well, it really is, right? So I'll go back to what I was talking about. Grew up on the farm and everything, but in Idaho, you could go from that farm ground in Meridian and Star and Eagle to the mountains and be on a raft in just a few minutes on the Payette. It's a great place. We have everything from the desert to the mountains. We have it all. When I was younger, too, I also worked as a hunting guide in central Idaho, and actually the second governor of Idaho's brother's homestead on the South Fork of the Salmon. Same thing, right? There's always something new. There's always a new adventure. And the people come here when they find out what we have. The problem is, too many of them are finding out what we have.
It's been crazy, hasn't it?
It's been crazy.
Before we jump into that, I didn't know that until I read your bio before this. So you guided up there. Mm-hmm. That is God's country, isn't it?
It was fun.
I mean, you spent some time in some of the most beautiful places, I think, on the planet Earth.
Yep. Sheep-eater Indian wars happened there. In fact, the military went in, I believe, with 50 mules and horses, and they walked out. They couldn't catch anybody. They just wave at them and take off. Beautiful, straight up and down country. We used to use some of the old sheep-eater Indian trails to get around, take the cattle down from the ranch up into the high country. And nobody knows it's there. It's hard to get to. It's beautiful.
Hard to get to, though.
Hard to get to.
Hard to get to unless you're able to get in.
Well, you can fly into some of those. Idaho is also blessed with a lot of those backcountry airports that they're trying to shut down some of them. But those if you ever have a chance to fly in with some of those guys delivering mail and have breakfast.
I'm gonna tell a story now.
It's pretty
cool. Mike
Boren,
one of my dearest friends. I love this guy, and he has an old Stinson, which is an old plane that he's restored, and I got to go with him, and we flew some incredible places.
Where'd you end up going?
So we flew in and had breakfast, and then we landed in probably 2 or 3 places But the highlight is you're in the Sawtooth, and it's the middle of the summer, and it's this perfect day.
Yeah.
And I just thought when you open the doors on those old planes that you'd have, but it's just peaceful. And he is swooping down, and there's just wildlife. And I honestly, like, as a memory, I'm just like, this is the most beautiful place on earth, and it's Idaho. We love it, but it's just
awesome.
It's amazing.
And you can get into some really cool places in the backcountry. We are so blessed. Idaho has it all. We have it all, right? And it's a safe place, good schools. We have it all. My biggest concern, though, is as this growth comes, they bring their problems, right?
Yeah, they do.
And a lot of people that are coming are fleeing from somewhere else. They're trying to get away. They're trying to get away because they want to come to.
Well, I'm going to get a little bit. I'm going to get into a little bit to your recent. I'm just going to jump there right now.
Let's go. What the heck?
I was blown away that out of state.
Oh yeah,
Hundreds
of thousands of
Well,
dollars.
it was. I think I chased it down. I think it was a total 1.1 million.
It's pop money.
And they drop it on you as not being conservative enough. I about fell. I started reading some of this stuff. I'm like, listen, this guy. For everyone else, it's like you're too far, and that's how they attacked you because they're all lies, right?
It was drug money too, right? It's drug money, and I don't, and that's a concern that I have. If they would have beat me, they did get a couple of races, but Idaho's a state that we're not used to seeing that kind of money spent on a race, right?
No,
and we're not used to that negative ads.
$1.1 million in a legislative race
for
is
one
insanity.
guy. For one guy, and because I don't listen, you know me. I do what I think is right. We can argue about the subject. We're friends when we walk out the door. And usually you and I agree on about 99% of everything. But these guys that are coming in here, they're not coming in here because they want to make Idaho better.
Hey, listen, what I love about you, Mike, and I say it to every single person I talk to, is I've never met a straighter shooter.
Yeah, try to.
I mean, it just always has been that way. And to your point, you pick up the phone usually on the tractor, and I say, hey, can we chat for a minute about something?
Always.
And you always tell me the way you see it. And I'll tell you, a lot of times I'm like, hey, I don't see it that way. You say I don't see it that way. And I'm like, great. But there's more of those times that it's like, hey, here's where I'm heading, and here's what it's about.
Well, when you know the whole story, it helps, right, too, because there's two sides to every story, and that's what everybody forgets. There's two sides to every story, and you got to be able to get both sides, decide what's best for Idaho, but not take it personal. Not take it personal. What those guys did with their lies and attacks,
it was horrible.
And to say that stuff, and they knew it was a lie, and they knew the stuff they were saying wasn't truthful, but it didn't matter to them, right? If we let people like that in Idaho, they will destroy the state.
Mike, I saw some of it, and I'm like, this is I think it was possibly some of the most egregious, fabricated lie, and it's come and traced back to drug money. I'm like, what is happening? I do find it interesting. We haven't scripted anything we're talking about today. But one of the things I found really interesting about it is we're right next to a state who's gone down this pathway, right? And I listened to a podcast 2 weeks ago from some liberal guys that passed the laws in I'll send it to you because it's fascinating.
Second thoughts, aren't they?
So these guys are the liberal dudes that jammed through the legislation not that long. It was 2000 to liberate everything over there with this drug stuff. And they already are regretting the entire thing. The whole podcast is how they got it wrong and how they're destroying communities and destroying that state.
And the families, they're destroying
the
family.
family.
The children.
So my point is,
children, it's over.
When we're this close to what it does, and that money comes in the way it did, gosh, it was appalling. It was just appalling.
I was very blessed. I survived it. A lot of people that wrote me off. Like they were figuring out who was going to replace me, and we were blessed. But it makes you wonder what you're doing. I can tell you that. You go home at night. You get the death threats. They're threatening to steal the kids. All kinds of this stuff just goes on. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But it makes you wonder what's going to happen if these guys do get in control, what they will do to the state. It will not be the state you have today. Go to California and Oregon, though, and look at all the tents and the mess that's caused by these drugs. It's a disaster.
And what I hate about it is like, I'm not picking on one person for coming here, but I've already had my run-ins up in McCall.
Oh, yeah.
because
you need to go farther north. I've got a farm farther north. I'll talk to you about that off air.
But I mean, what happens is I think they come in from out of state, and I think they genuinely don't want things to be what they came from, but they're also, most of them, a lot of them are on government pensions and don't see the world we do and don't see Idaho the way we do. And we value property rights. We value personal freedom. We value these things down to the very core, and it's going to be different. But I do think we need really good leadership through it, and I appreciate the people that are willing to put up with the crap, because there's a lot of it, Mike.
Well, there's a lot of them that won't go and be legislators anymore because of the crap, right?
Yeah.
And you saw a lot of people after this election. You'll probably see a lot that will tack it up. They're not going to want to put up with that stuff.
No.
It's just not. It's a $20,000 a year job. It's just not. It's not worth to some. To listen, I ran for one reason. Idaho's taxes when I ran were some of the highest in the nation. Your income taxes used to be 8.2%. That's why I ran. And I have lowered them. We're now at a flat tax. We're under 6. We're at 5.695. This year you'll see me bring another bill to keep lowering the income tax. That's why I ran. And cut more tax in my own history. We've cut property taxes the last 3 years.
Let's talk about that, because I think sometimes, what's wrong with our country, well, there's a lot of things that I worry about right now.
There's a lot to worry about.
But I think like, if you take nationally, big, giant issues that rarely get talked about because we get stuck in these silos of political things and a lot of social issues. And we're not talking about tax policy. We're not talking about the national debt. We're not talking about living as a nation physically conservative so that we can survive and not destroy our nation for our youth. There are very few people that will talk about it still, but there are not very many people talking about it. And in our state, one of the things we don't give enough credit to, and I love talking about this, you look at, while the rest of the nation, how they've run their business, because in a lot of ways the state is the largest business in Idaho, right? It's a business. It's government spending. And we're not perfect, but you look at our reserves we have, you look at the way we do the budget, you look at the way things are run, we are the model for the rest of the country. And I know you guys get called and talked to by a lot of politicians around this country saying, how are you doing it?
Well, listen, we're blessed. And if you've watched me as speaker the last 2 years, what have we done? And we'll go back to that budget as an example. I want to fundamentally change the way we do budgets, and I have. The first year, I wanted to switch up that committee so we vote separately. Last year, you saw the next step that I want, which was to separate out the budgets from the maintenance, what it takes to keep the doors open, and the add-ons. Our double-digit budget growth in the state last year went to 1.7%. We got the budgets under control. The next step you'll see if I'm speaker next year is I want to go into zero-based budgeting. I want to go from that maintenance budget to the bottom. I want to see what's necessary, not what's hidden in there, and drag it out. I want to do what I would do in my own farming business, right? I want to make it accountable. I want to make it lean machine and give the rest back. The more that's in the economy turning, the better off we all are at.
How do you balance? Listen, there's some hard things, right? Because I don't think anyone is like, whether we're talking about Department of Corrections, or we're talking about Department of Education, or whether if you compared lean, mean businesses that every Monday morning, you know Ryan Cleverly, my guy.
Yeah,
he's my
Ryan.
numbers guy.
Love Ryan.
He's tighter than a popcorn fart, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a good guy.
He's a good guy, but he's the guy that every Monday we sit down and we talk about budgets and revenue and profitability and how you doing it, right?
The needs and the wants.
The needs and the wants, and that's just how you run a business to be successful. And you look at how. Anyway, my point is government rarely runs like that, right?
It hasn't. And we're trying to change that at the state level.
So you're trying to change, and I think there's some really good things. I think Brandon Wolf doesn't get. You look at his transparency thing.
The transparency stuff is amazing.
No one talks about that, but if you go to his website, he's got. It's either he's gonna shoot me for not knowing this, but it's either Transparency Tuesday or Transparency Thursday, and he comes out with something. Yeah. You can go look at the budget.
You can look at the local budgets now too. We put that in there so you can start picking up your city and your county.
I love all that. So how do you, with knowing that governments aren't the most efficient, how do you still maintain the things we need, specifically education?
So let's talk about education. It's back to the needs and wants, right?
Yeah.
Education's going through a transition now because of COVID. We had the COVID thing. We started paying teachers and not teachers, but schools based on enrollment. The kids that were supposed to be in the classroom that were at home doing something on Zoom. And I also think that things changed for the families at that time too, because parents were watching what their children were being taught on those Zoom lessons, and they weren't so happy about it. And a lot of those kids haven't come back, right? Yeah. They're going into charters, they're going into privates, they're going into religion. I mean, they're moving out. And that's why you've seen the attendance of the schools statewide. It's flattened out and dropping down because those parents are pulling those kids out because they're worried about what they're being taught. So now you've got this problem where you have less students. And the state's funding should always follow the students, in my opinion. If you got a kid, we should be funding. If you don't have a kid, we should put that money where the kid is, not where the kid's not. And we've been doing that transition as we go to attending children and not those that are enrolled that don't exist. But as we've done that, we're finding there's some things we can do to make things better, but there's some things that are out of whack, right? Some of our schools are done better than others, like any other business. Some are run better, but some of them are heavy on the top. You don't need a lot of administrators to run schools, and you're seeing that push. You'll see some stuff this year to try to line that back in. The other problem you got, though, is how do you readjust the funding for children that are there today that exist and not the ones that don't exist. And there's going to be a transition. You saw it start this year.
Yeah.
We've sent the money back, but you have another problem with COVID. All that free federal dollar that floated in their dollars, they're drying up. This is, you're to the end of it. And that's shifting things too. So we've been high on the hog. They've had money for everything, and now that money's going away, and they got to go back to where they were before. And it's going to be a hard transition.
We've never talked about this. So I'm going to ask you some questions because, and I don't know that there's answers to this, but when I was digging into education, like, because I wanted to learn. I do think we've got higher education. You got K-12. You got one state school board that runs the whole thing, and I think that's hard.
I'm not a big fan of that board, by the way. We can talk about that.
But it's really hard. I mean, because you've got. I remember one of my really good friends, Andy Scoggin, was on it for a while, and he's like, I went to the first meeting, and he's like, there was no way on God's green earth
you're going to read it all.
You're going to read it all or be prepared. I mean, you're talking about coaches' salaries, you're talking about K-12, you're talking about higher. He's just like,
too much.
Too much for one thing. So then I think, well, fundamentally, does that make sense that we're making, it's just how do you govern when something's that big? That's one. Two, I visited, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was 80-something school districts and went and met with their superintendents around the state.
Right.
Of 113
you
back
did
then.
Good.
I did.
I'm impressed.
But when you sit and listen to them, there's a couple things that immediately come to my mind. One is take the whole Weiser, Payette, New Plymouth area right there,
they've
right?
got kids in Oregon they're teaching too. There's another Drinkle there.
But you can hit a Mike Moyle 4-iron and be in a different school district.
Yep.
Each of them with their own and I'm like,
All administration. Look at Midville and Council, 7 miles apart on football teams, on everything. Why are we doubling up on?
Makes no sense.
Same with the universities, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Butch tried to fix that for years. We have a problem with the University of Idaho, but why do we have a president at every one of them, and we're all fighting for territory when we could all be together working together? So
you've got administrative overlap. That if you were running it like a business, you'd go, we would never do it like this. So you got those inefficiencies, but then you have the kids. And I worry as you shift, and I don't know how you balance this, Mike, because you got kind of the great state of Ada, you got Canyon County, you got Bonneville County, you got some of these big counties, and then you've got rural Idaho. And policy changes that happen in the state trying to affect
both. Yeah.
How do you balance it? Because I think they're competing in the way they use those dollars. And so something that's not intended to cause harm in rural Idaho may do that with policy shifts. How do you balance that?
A couple of things on that. Think about it this way. We actually penalized the big school districts per a lawsuit, by the way, from at that time, Meridian School District, West Ada now. They were saying back in the 70s, 80s, whatever it was, that a big school district that's back when they were a small one, should be able to do it cheaper than a little one. And so the funding formula for the state's based on that, right? Meridian West Ada gets a lot less money than that Midville Council does, right? They get a lot more per student there. That's the same thing with charter schools. The charters get a little more per student than the big districts. And there's been a fight the last 2 years on trying to adjust that funding formula to make it more fair, to take care of our rural friends, but at the same time take care of the bigger school districts too. But what we've done is caused a problem. We've incentivized school districts to break up. Think about Brighams. Now it's no longer Port of Grainsville because we'll get more money if we parlay off from them.
Which is exactly opposite.
Which is exactly opposite what you want to do. Will you be better off combining so you could get rid of the overhead? But we've created a situation where incentivized. It's the same with highway districts. Why do we have so many? We should consolidate them. It's the same with and there's talk of trying to consolidate these government agencies to make them more efficient. But it's hard, especially in schools, because Midville doesn't want to lose their football team. Neither does Count. You see what I'm saying? You get that push-pull. And then all of a sudden, it's not about the education. It's about the football team. And I don't know how you cross that. Now, we did do something a few years ago to help that. We said that if you will combine your administrators, if for example, if Weiser and Midville decide to overlap and share their same superintendent, we'll give you the money and you can use it for whatever you want to try to incentivize consolidation of the administration. I don't know that it has. The only one I heard of, and I don't know if it's still the case, it's been a couple years ago, was McCall Donnelly, and I think they were working with council, but I don't know if that's true or not, if it still happens. I don't know. We tried to incentivize it instead of force it.
I just know, like, it's the biggest, like, if you look at the budget, right, it's corrections
Yeah.
and it's education.
Yeah, it's health and welfare.
And it's health and welfare,
That's
right?
the one that worries me.
Those are the real biggies. And it's like, but then on the flip side of it, you think about families in Idaho, whether you're rural or you live in a more populated area, it's what education matters to people. And there's just such huge decisions.
Oh, no, the grandkids are, I was with the grandkids on Sunday, right? Father's Day, having a good time with some, not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed with some good grandkids. And it comes up, right? We talked about the schools, we
Yeah.
talk about the options, what they're learning in school, and they're in Middleton, and they're in some good schools, and they're doing a good job there. But it is a very important factor, because that education is the groundwork and how those children are what's gonna happen to them in the future. But there's another fundamental problem we don't talk about, and that is the collapse of the family, in a sense.
Yeah.
You don't, and I was talking about this the earlier day with a friend. We were talking about how it was when we were kids, we came home, mom was there, right? You came home, mom was there, got something to eat when you got out of school, and then you went out and did your chores. Milked the cows, irrigate, whatever it was, right? You went and did your work. The kids today come home to a cell phone. Right?
Oh my gosh, Mike.
And I don't know how you break that. Watching kids sitting next to each other and not talking, they're texting. And they're, from me to you, I'm like, what the heck?
Matthew, we haven't talked about this on our podcast yet. Pull up Huberman Lab. So Huberman's a podcast I listen to all the time, and he had a guy on he's a social scientist, and
Huberman Lab.
look up it was one that was out like last week, Maddie, and it's on how phones have changed it's a 2-hour listen, and at the end of it I want to make sure, there it is, smartphones and mental health. Click on that one, and
That's not good.
and I want to make sure I talk about who this is from. Who's the guy that does this, that he had on?
Dr. Jonathan Haidt.
Jonathan Haidt. This is it. So Dr. Jonathan Haidt, smartphones and social media impact and mental health.
It's messing them up.
You got to listen to this,
I'll have to check it
because
out.
at 2
I
hours.
tried it and I found that indeed it makes the best possible tasting cup of coffee. And I'm not
Stop
alone
that
in my
one.
love of the AeroPress.
He's talking about coffee right now.
Over 55,000 five-star
going.
reviews. AeroPress is the
I'll check it out later, though. But
for
it's
our
destroying
listeners-
our children.
Listen, this doctor he has on basically says, when brains are developing and all those dopamine pathways
Right.
and everything are happening, he's like basically handing someone the internet when they're 13 years old and saying, here, have at it, is what has destroyed everything. And he's talking about these pathways. His point is, until they're 25, you can't start rewiring them. So we're taking our most vulnerable people,
Messing 'em up.
We're messing them up. And his advice is threefold. One is flip phones until you're 16, no social media until you're a senior in high school. And then this is interesting, I was going to talk to you about it. So then his last thing is, we got to return to childhoods in America. And he'll talk about most of this next generation, a lot of our soft skills happen when we worked it out on the playground, where we worked it out in life, because you're learning how to interact with people and how to have fun and how to, just think about your life growing up as a toddler all the way through.
I'm back to that horse when I was 6 years
Yeah.
old, right? And when and the thing you just brought up that makes sense to me is figuring things out, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I really appreciate about, especially my grandkids over in Middleton, is, I call them feral, man. Those kids are running everywhere. There's 7 of them, and they're awesome. I love them to death. But they're always out working together because they have to.
Yeah.
And mom doesn't let them have the phone to watch a TV show once a day or whatever. But they're outside. You're outside. You're in the dirt. You're going to learn how to do this, right? And they help Grandpa irrigate. They get to go do all those things that make them better, I believe.
I'm really glad, because sometimes old guys like us get looked at like, we're like the Clint Eastwood, like, get off my lawn,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Character. But it was really good to hear these doctors, because they're confirming this idea that, hey, when we change this culture, we are letting these kids' minds be wired in a way that it's not going to be the same for America.
You can't unwire it.
You can't unwire it.
can't
And
fix it.
so we got to stop. Anyways, let me talk a little bit
But we're
about.
all over the place. What's
I know
next?
we're all over the place. Let me talk a little bit with you about Idaho families because I know you're a family guy. I know how much you love your family, your kids.
They're the best. That's all about.
That's what you're serving for, is the
Yep.
next generation.
That's all about.
What are some other challenges that are coming for them here, and your role? You're in a pretty. I mean, listen. I think when you come into session every year, it's always interesting, right?
Yeah, it's always something you don't expect that's the big thing.
It's always the big thing. And so as you see kind of the years ahead of you, what are the things you see come down the pike that we're going to have to grapple with that affect those families?
I think you're seeing us do some of that stuff. I know a lot of people complain about the social issues that we've been grappling with. But think about it. Last year we dealt with the pronoun thing, right? We needed to, we fixed the pronoun thing. I don't have to call you by your pronoun.
Yeah.
That's a good thing because that messes our children up, right?
But-
We fixed some of the issues dealing with man, woman things. We define a male and female. Simple stuff that you would think were common sense that we have to do in statute, right? We got the boys out of the girls' bathrooms. Simple stuff that you wouldn't think we'd have to deal with. The guys not being in the women's sport. All those things affect our children. All those things affect our family. It's like they're trying to change what the family structure is to something that it never was meant to be. And those social issues are the worst issues because they're the hardest ones on the individuals. Those are also ones we start fighting amongst themselves with.
Yeah, and a lot of times it dominates. It dominates so much of the narrative. I mean, how many weeks are you guys usually in session?
We try to be out of there by the end of March. We start the 1st of January. It doesn't always work.
This year it was, what was it?
This is the 1st of April.
1st of April, right?
But it's gone longer. So hopefully, some of the stuff we're doing on budgets, though, will push that up. And some of the stuff we're doing in regards, I've changed things up. I'm forcing the executive branch on the House side to have some legislator that's a House member carry their budgets or their bills, whatever they're. That's got a lot of those pieces of legislation just went away now. They can't find anybody who wants to carry them. So we're starting to change things up. You're seeing us do some stuff where we pulled back the rules. If you've watched that, we can talk about that if you want. We're changing fundamentally and pulling the power back to the legislature and also trying to give it back to the people. Give them the freedom. Freedom's what made this country. Don't want to take it away.
What about infrastructure? Let's talk about infrastructure.
We have dumped a lot of money into infrastructure the last few years. And we did another $200 million for the bridges statewide again this time.
Yep.
A lot of money. We'll do more of that in the future. Probably not as much as we have if you've watched with the economy slowing down. The revenues are not coming in. But we'll do more there.
Yeah.
We'll do more to keep that we're playing catch up, right? The growth's coming faster, we can keep up with it. But there's a lot of good.
There was deferred. The other thing I remind people all the time is, back 15 years ago, we had a little thing where we commissioned a study privately of what deferred maintenance we had.
Yeah.
So there was a bunch of deferred maintenance that you guys had to catch up on. And
well, we'll never catch up with all, but that was part of the $200 million a year dump just for bridges,
Yeah.
right? There's some hiccups here in Ada County. You'll see some stuff dealing with Ada County Highway District coming up. But statewide, things are a lot better than they were. And there's a lot of projects going on, which this time of year frustrates us all, right? You can't get anywhere. I get that. But when it's done, it's going to be a lot better. I'll be happy when 16 gets to the freeway. But no, we're spending a lot of money on the roads, which we need to do to keep up with the growth.
Yeah, a couple of things that I'm passionate about that I know is not on the radar anywhere, but I think Garrett Lofto with Simplot, CEO of Simplot, we've got a little group we're putting together trying to talk about big issues, like decade-long issues, like what do we do when we're out of right-of-way on the freeway? How do we improve, what does public transportation look like? Is there a bypass? That's a four-letter word, a lot of places, but at some point
you got to do it. In fact, the bypass for this valley is going to be a hard deal because you can get a little bit around, hit Galloway across 55 to the other, but you got to go through Cuna and around, and because the freeway turns north, it screws you up.
Yep.
I don't know. 16, if you look at that, there were some plans that brought it in around through Cunamore Road, but now there's a lot to think about in the future.
Where does who has the responsibility for the long-term thinking? Because I think here we are sitting in 2024. I can't believe it, Mike. We're getting old, but I mean,
you ain't getting old. I'm old.
I know, but
I was setting siphon tubes today. I can get down and set them. I can't get back up. What the heck?
you want to hear? We're going to get off topic again. So,
All right, sorry.
so here, this is a funny story. So I move out to Cuna, and I get a call from Jim Risch, and he is a great guy.
Yes.
I love him. I've grown to. He's become my farming buddy. So
he's a good senator too. Of all of our congressional delegation, he's one that can get things done. He's good to work.
I went from knowing him professionally as a politician to becoming his farming partner, and I'm telling you, I can't keep up with the guy. He is as authentic as they come, but So we take over this lease on this farm, and it's 80 acres, and there's siphon tubes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Be
And
glad. That's
I-
recharge.
I get all the siphon tubes, and I get out there on the first day, and I'm watching a YouTube video how to do this, and I called a guy, and I had
Hey,
some
you
help.
should've come by to help
I had
me.
like 4 people. So Mike, it's a funny story. So I got 4 other guys and me, and we're setting siphon tubes for the first time ever.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm on YouTube, and it's Aaron Lowe. He owns a landscaping company here, and it's me and Aaron and a few of his guys, and we're out trying to set. And so we're like an hour and a half into setting siphon tubes. Okay.
You should have called.
And we finally get them all set, right? And then you know the little tin things that hold the water back?
Yeah.
It all gets set, and one of his guys hits the tin tube, and the whole water goes down, you lose the siphon.
Yeah, it all goes away.
And he looked at me, and he says, Tommy, you're effed. We're out of here.
Oh, it's not that bad.
And he walked out of the
Left
farm,
one.
and I got on the phone, and I like called, and I said, how do I buy gated pipe? I can't do this. So I bought gated pipe, but I've never set another siphon
No,
tube.
siphon
Anyway,
tubes. I set hundreds of those myself a day. I've got.
I can't-
Our crews we're farming about 50 fields between Nampa to Middleton, Start Eagle.
oh, I don't know how you do it.
I'm too old to do it.
Anyway, like back to Jim, and then we'll go on. But so we farmed together for a couple years, and he finally came in and he sat down. He's like, hey, how much money are we going to lose this year? And I said, I don't know, but I'd rather lose money with you, Jim, than anybody else.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's an amazing guy. Anyway, I can't remember what we were talking about before. You
Whatever. But those are the experiences that children grew up with.
Yeah.
Tied back to the family thing that they grew up with and experienced, and that's what made them what they were. They had to figure out how to. I was out.
That's what we're
with,
talking about.
I was out there with my 6 and 7-year-old grandson and granddaughter on Sunday night. You got to set the water when the time's there. And they're setting those tubes, and just these little kids, setting the tubes. And it's good for them, right? They know how to drive the Ranger out. They know where to put the tins. They know how to set the tubes. They know how to dig the corrugate.
And it's fun for them.
It is to a point. They get tired of it pretty fast.
I know they get tired of it, but they learn how to work.
They learn how. It makes character of them too. But it unites them too, right?
Man,
so
I
they're
get-
doing it together. It's back to what we said before. When we were kids, it was together, right? The families were together. Our families are not together. We got to bring our families back. And it's going to be hard.
Think of interacting, figuring things out. Dinner.
Yeah, every Sunday, it's awesome.
Think of dinner, sitting down and talking.
Have to.
Thinking of no phones, and I don't know how we claw back to some of those. And then I listen. As soon as we start talking about this, they're like, well, that's not like what it's like for every family, and it's not.
I
But
get
there's a
that.
lot of
I get
people,
that.
and there's a lot of heritage in this place, and I think people understand that's what makes
That's what
this
made
place
Idaho.
great, right? And that's why it's such a beacon. It's because people are moving here because they feel that and see that. Now the question is, how do you
keep it, right?
how do you keep it?
And how do you prevent, and you kind of started this a little while ago, how do you preserve the family and protect the family, right? And that's why I brought up the social issues. You're going to have to address the social issues whether we like to or not.
What about so we talked higher ed? I skipped over.
I saw that.
So I purposefully listen. I purposefully am not going to say much about the Republican Party convention that
Oh,
happened.
yeah, I was going to say they did some stuff there that's going to make it interesting.
But I do know that their platform changed to eliminate higher education.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I've got it. I was not there. Anyways, but I think a lot of that had to do with the launch stuff. I think that the launch program has a lot of people concerned on the conservative side of things because it's a handout. And I think there
Is
needs,
it a handout or is it a handout, Mike? Come on, let's debate this one.
I think the way it is right now, it's a handout. But I think that if you change it to where it was originally sold at, when they first came to me, it was going to start in the high schools. We're going to teach these kids how to weld and do
Yeah.
mechanics in high school. And they're going to go out the door with the job. Then it turned into, we're not going to do the high school. So we dumped $45 million there for CTE programs 1 year and took the rest of it and gave it to kids to go. And they were only going to go to community college and get a job, plumbing, electrical. Now it's turned into, it's going to go to the university. It's expanded. Now I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Well, let me
but
just
there's
let
gotta
me
be
push
some
back just a little
accountability.
bit. I think in the valley, I know the valley better than I don't know. Well, I do I think in Coeur d'Alene up in Post Falls, what Ron Nelson did with K-Tech up there, it's a model for the whole state. I think there's some really good things going on.
Look what's going on in West Ada.
Yes.
They have an amazing program. Those kids, one of the kids that works for me setting siphon tubes every day, his brother went there in an automotive class. He's got a job while he's going to high school.
I love what they're doing.
That's a good thing.
I love what they're doing in CUNA. I love what they're doing in Boise School
CWI's
District.
got a great
And then let's
welding
talk about
program.
CWI. Like, I think Gordon Jones is
I love the guy. He does a good job.
I think he is one of the most brilliant human beings on the face of the planet.
And he thinks outside the box, right?
And he is, I think he is figuring out a lot of things. And I look at the number of people that have applied and how many people will end up in CWI. I have a hard time criticizing a program that's going to get people. The currency we
that.
need right now, Mike, is workers. So we have a
if you could get him to get off the phone.
we have that's actually a really good point. We have a nonprofit called Teens to Trades, and we scholarship kids to CWI in plumbing, HVAC, electrical, and welding. We do it every year. We raise money for it.
And that's a good thing, right?
It's a great thing, but the more I dig into their programs and what Launch is going to do for that, I worry that it's easy for people to complain about everything, and I see the Launch program as one of the smartest things I've seen in my adult life to get Idaho kids into Idaho jobs.
Okay, so let's take a step back. I'm not saying launch is a bad thing, but I think to get to where you're saying, you're going to have the accountability part that's not there yet, right? And I think you're going to have the oversight that's not there yet. You're going to have if the student doesn't perform, the money comes back so we can give it to another student. You're going to have some of those accountability issues that are not there yet.
I have always said, when I looked at it, it's been 6 years ago, if you ever put metrics on higher ed that funded them based on results,
it would be a good thing.
And results meaning, are you keeping Idaho kids and connecting them to Idaho jobs? And that was a major part of your funding formula. Well, a lot of this goes away.
No, I don't disagree with that.
And I think what and you know so much more about this than I do, but I think the intention is right.
I don't have a problem with the intention. The problem that I have is you've got to get the accountability, and you've got to, and we throwing $80 million and just giving everybody a check does not necessarily mean you're going to get the results. You got to have the accountability to make sure you're getting the results. You got to check to make sure they're coming in, the kids are getting the jobs, they're getting what they want, the training. Then it's going to be fine. But if it's not, you got to figure out how to stop the leakage.
I'm betting on Gordon Jones. I'm betting on
of
those
all of them,
programs.
Gordon Jones is the one that he's always been able to do it for less money. He's always been able to have the results. And he brought up something when I was with him the other day. We were looking at some of the welders. It's been a while back, actually. And he says a lot of them don't go to the second year. And the board of education we talked about, they get growly about that, right? You're not having results. Well, you know why the kids don't go the second year? Because they got a job.
Oh, yeah.
And so who cares if they go the second year? If they've got a job and they're successful and they're happy, we've accomplished the goal, right? That's what we want. And he's talking, we're giving him the opportunity now to do some 4-year stuff, which the board, we had to fight them on that too. And you watch, he's going to be able to do that 4-year stuff way cheaper than those universities are. And the kids are going to come out with the same or better degree and the same or better job. So he's thinking outside the box.
I think there's a lot to learn on higher ed. Back when the pathways came out at BYU Idaho, this concept that if you do this, you get a certificate. If you do that, you get an associate's degree, and if you do this, you get a degree. We're not saying that degrees aren't great, but we wired kids' brains wrong with the go on thing.
It's because they wanted the paper.
Remember the go on thing?
Yeah.
The go on thing was miserably.
It failed.
It failed miserably because everyone was like, "Well, I'm not going to college, therefore I'm a failure." No. Go for a year to a welding program and get a job for $35 an hour.
Exactly.
And that is a ginormous success.
And you're happy if it's what you want to do. Listen, you can't force people to do anything. You're never going to be happy. But there's another reason a lot of those kids didn't go on, right? Because they had a job.
Yeah.
Think about it. I never graduated from college. A lot of people that I know didn't. They figured out a path. They were successful. And if launch can help us get there, that's all right. But right now, it needs some constraints.
I think I'm going to die on a hill. I think it's about getting skills to these kids and getting line of sight to Idaho jobs, and that needs to be your metric. And if you can do that,
if you can get the job that keeps them here, that's what it's all about, right?
And those are good jobs. All my, Pancho Romero, Advanced Heating and Cooling. You look at what he does with his people that get there. They can raise a family here.
Oh yeah,
it is a great job.
Think of Doug Sayre in Eastern Idaho as welders. He's going around the country buying companies, not for the company, but for the employees.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying there's got to be some accountability.
That was a good discussion.
Whatever.
What else? What are the things you have?
Well, you'll see me do some more stuff on the rules. One of the problems that I've always felt, now I'm switching big gears. One of the things you've seen me as speaker do the last couple of years is dealing with the regulations in the state of Idaho and the rules, right? Rules have the effect of law. And so the executive branch, when the legislature passes a bill, the executive branch passes a rule to enforce the bill if it's not specified in the bill, right? And they would take the leeway to go a little farther than they should. And sometimes they had rules that had no law to them, but they have the effect of law. And they used to go into place with one individual putting it in his drawer. It was the law of the land. So we got that changed. Now it takes both bodies to approve those rules. You've seen the governor and those of us on the legislature start cleaning out the rules that aren't necessary and try to compact them. In fact, last year we did some more stuff where the judiciary has to look at them neutral. They can't have a favoritism where the federal government. We're doing good things on the rules, which will help deregulate some of the problems we've had with bureaucrats trying to tell us what we can and can't do, doing it through rules. The federal government needs to fix this too, by the way. They don't do anything with legislation. It's all done through a rule that's never been passed by anybody. And I don't know why the country hasn't pushed back on it. But we fixed that in Idaho, and there's a little more to do. We're getting there. But hopefully somebody back east can figure that out, because that's how they're doing the things they're doing to us now. It stays, not through laws.
Yeah, what a mess it is back there.
I was back there the other day for a Supreme Court hearing. It's kind of weird to go and sit in front of the Supreme Court and have them talk about Moyle versus U.S. But I don't know why. It's a long story. I don't know how our congressional delegation guys do it. I don't know. That's a different world.
You know, listen, again, my admiration for Jim Risch is like, I can't be any higher. I love the man. I think and I've asked him that a whole bunch of times while we're in a field together. Yeah. I'm trying to keep up with him, walking through a field and changing irrigation, and I'll say, how do you do it? And I've learned a lot from him, because
he likes it back there. He does a good job.
He does a good job, and he's just like, you have to realize the pace of government, and you have to look for the long-term wins. And you know, he's gonna run again, and that guy is sharp as a tack and ready to go. But you got those leaders that really understand how it works, and I appreciate what they do. I couldn't do it, but it's nice to have guys back there fighting for us.
I agree.
That understand what's going on. Now, who knows what happens this year, and I don't want to get into that.
But he brings up a good point, right? And that's one of the hardest things for me when I got into the legislature. I'm used to the farm, right? You're used to the business. You got a problem, fix it now.
Yeah.
Now.
This is a key point.
Now,
I know where you're going.
Now with politics, you got to think, all right, this is going to take some time. And you got to go over here, and you got to go over there. And you got to come. It's not a straight get it done now path. It's frustrating as can be, because it's you got to think ahead. You got to have a plan.
So two things.
And it just doesn't happen right now.
You need to have a leader that sees that, and then a leader capable of directing that, right?
Yeah, and that's the hard part for the new guys, right?
Yeah.
Because I had one of the new guys called me just the other day going, I didn't understand why you did what you did, but now I do, right? Because it's the game, and you got to go through the weavy wavy to get to the end, and when you get there and you want to get it done now, it's frustrating.
Well, this went by way too fast. I got two more questions.
Good,
but
we done?
We're almost done. Hey,
you come help me set siphon too.
You would fire me.
But I'm changing clothes.
You would fire me in like 3.5 minutes. Biggest life lesson you've learned to date, and
biggest life lesson.
Yeah, what's some wisdom you'd impart on as a longtime leader?
Back to what we were just talking about. The hardest thing for me, and probably the biggest lesson I've learned, is the patience part. I'm not a patient guy. I'm a foul-mouthed farmer. And so the patience part is the one that I have to remind myself often. And the other key to that is the two sides of the story. You know, we always think we're right, and there's the other side. I mean, one of the biggest things that new legislators get themselves in trouble with is they commit early, and they don't know the other side. Because you and I will be talking, that's a great idea, and then, and we're all in, and then somebody comes around and says, hey, but you forgot this, and you're like, ooh, maybe it's yet other piece. So the patience and the two sides of the story are the two things that kind of go combo with the political stuff.
Mike, I love this country.
Me too.
I was brought up by two grandparents that I lived right next door to, and my grandpa Ahlquist had the biggest American flag in his basement. It was a giant American flag, and then he had an American flag that flew over the Capitol. And every single thing he did, the little trinkets he did, the crafts he did, it was all about this country. And when you would talk to him, he would get emotional. He would talk about fighting for this country. He would talk about his heritage. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing about my grandpa is he was a Mormon-hating Catholic, and
how the heck did that work?
Well, so he was a Mormon-hating Catholic, but he worked at Kennecott Copper, and
he was around him.
But he loved this country. And then I go, my other grandpa, my grandpa Pedersen, that I grew up right next door to. He was a patriarch in the Mormon church. Couldn't have been more different. But you know what he shared in common? He loved this country. He would go on these long, very emotional, when he looked you in the eyes, you would see how much he loved this country. So I grew up with I grew up with this reverence. I remember when I was 16 years old going back to Valley Forge on a leadership conference. And I remember just sitting there tearful, like listening to these stories of how our country defied all odds and we became this place. And I remember thinking as a kid that I came from blue collar miners, thinking I can go do anything I want to do. And,
Exactly.
and damn it, I did.
And you did good.
And I was able to go to school and you know, the American dream. That's the America I love. And it seemed like we could come together. Ronald Reagan was the stinking president of the United States. And it was amazing. Everyone was so proud. So tell me about, tell me about your love of this country and how do we get that back?
Listen, we talked a little bit about all the people that are moving here. They're moving here because they're afraid, right? They're afraid they're losing their country. That's what they're afraid of. Our country is so blessed. One of my favorite things to do is listen to CDs on the history of the United States. And there's no reason that we beat, that we won the, Revolutionary War. There's no reasons. God's hand was in everything, from fog to you name it. His hands were there, and our country was blessed by God, and it has been blessed by God since it started. But you've seen our country starting to leave God.
Yeah.
And as we leave God, things go the wrong way. I pray often that our country can come back, that God will, intervene, because we're in a bad spot. You watch what's going on nationally.
Yeah.
But we are still, hands
envy
down, worldwide, the envy of the world and the best place. And we've got to do all we can to keep it there. And your only way you're going to keep it there is to bring God back into it. If the families, schools,
and come together. We got to come together.
That's how you do it.
We got to come together.
If you don't, we're in trouble. It's if you go to my office, there's the 10 Commandments and a thing of Christ and the flag, right? And every day we start. In fact, one of the things I started to speak, we start every meeting with prayer. And it's interesting to hear the prayers of the different. I used to have to make people pray, right? Now we have a meeting, everybody volunteers. But it's interesting how many now start praying for our country.
Yeah.
Praying that we can heal, praying that we can unite, praying that we can bring it back to what it was. Because God's what made it, and if we don't bring God back, that's what we'll lose it.
And we got to bring people together.
Yeah, but that's how you do it. God.
We've got to do it.
And I don't care what religion you are.
No.
You're Catholic, Mormon, whatever. It doesn't matter. And that's a problem that I saw that in my election. That people were holding religion against people and voting differently because of religion. I don't. How you worship God doesn't matter as long as you worship God, right?
Yeah.
And we've got to quit using religion as a way to break us up. We've got to use it to bring us together.
I agree. All things, we got to come together. We got to come together and feel that pride of we're all in this together. We're coming together. It's what made and we.
It is. It's the pyramid, right? God is the top, and then the individuals and the family, and the state and the government's all the way at the bottom. We got to put God back at the top because we've flipped that pyramid around, and we've got the federal government at the top. We need God at the top.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you, Mike. I got to tell you, I've known you a long time, but you pick up your phone every time you call, and you give both sides of it. That's what like. Whenever your name comes up, I said, hey, I get a straight shot from that guy. He tells me what it is, tells me both sides of it.
I try not to swear all the time. I think I did a pretty good job today.
I don't think, Maddie, did we swear at all? I don't think there was one.
Good.
I don't think there was an S word. And that's like coming right out of a field at a farm.
Right. That's a good thing.
No, it's great. I really appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you.
I think it was
We've always
fun.
been good friends, and I always love the debate and the conversation. And I always love the stories, too, because a lot of people don't know a lot of the other stories we don't talk about. That's good stuff.
It's great, Mike. I appreciate you. Thank you to you and your family for the sacrifice, and I'm glad this went well, and I knew it would. But
I didn't. Oh my gosh, I was nervous.
Well, and I think politics in Idaho, especially with this time we're in, that I don't know how it ends, but it's going to be interesting. This next session is going to be interesting, and having steady, consistent leadership to help guide this is so critical for our families, for my family, for my kids, for their kids.
For mine too. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
And back to what I was at. It's all about the kids and the grandkids.
I appreciate you, bud.
Appreciate
Thanks
you
for
too.
being
Let's
a
have
friend.
some fun. Let's do it again.
Thank you.
Thanks.